Okay, so I thought instead of talking about like the actors and actresses or a silent film, I thought we would talk about one of the directors. And why not talk about Georges Méliès? And I sure hope I'm saying his last name right. We've talked about a few of his, like we just did Trip to the Moon. And I believe he did the very first silent film, that one that was the horror film. I'm pretty sure that was him. Of course, this doesn't have. I had it queued up, and of course, it's not going to show me. You know what? I'm pretty sure. I thought I was prepared, and I'm not. But anyway, Georges Méliès was, of course, this famous director. He was this French director, great icon in silent film. Okay, let's see. I always forget that it started. Oh, he did more than I thought. No, it goes way, way back. So, and I probably could have looked, but yeah, so he did that particular silent film where it's the first horror film. The first actual horror film. So now that we got that figured out. He absolutely loved the hand painted effect. He did the time lapse photography. He did a lot of dissolving, which I don't think I show that very much in some of these films. I'll have to find one. He did the, yeah, it was him that did the four heads, and so he did the special effects, multiple exposures, time-lapse photography. So I hate to break it to you, if you think that you're doing something new, he probably already did it. Oh, he experimented. I mean, that's just what he did. So, in one of my other videos, I mentioned that a lot of his stuff was documented, so they were numbered, and that was just part of his experimentation. You know, he had like this idea going, and it's what he did. So Georges, he was born in 1861 and he died in 1938. And let's see. He started out in a shoe business after he completed his education, of course. He doesn't really say what his education was. No, wait, maybe it does. Attended, and I know I'm gonna butcher that. At the age of 7, until it was bombed during the Franco-Prussian War, he was then sent to somewhere else. In his memoirs, he emphasized his formal classical education. In contrast to accusations early in his career, most filmmakers had been illiterates. So he did go to an acting school. That's what it sounds like. I just can't. I know I'm going to trip over that. French is not. My mom can speak French, but I'm not that. We know I butcher languages and I feel awful. Often disciplined by teachers for covering his notebooks and textbooks with drawings, young Georges began building cardboard puppet theaters and began to craft sophisticated marionettes as a teenager. And he graduated in 1880. So then he moved on, worked in a family shoe business where he learned how to sew. And it does say that he was a costume designer. So then he began to visit an Egyptian hall that was in London. I don't know if it's still there. Well, maybe it is. Sometimes, looks like it's not because it's just showing illustrations. It might have been torn down or it may have burned down. Oh, it says here, in 1905, the building was demolished to make way for flats and offices. And is now the site of a Starbucks coffee shop. Oh, goodness. That's funny and sad at the same time. Because actually, the pictures for it and everything, it's beautiful. But anyway, so he visited the Egyptian hall, and it was run by a London illusionist. And so, of course, Georges became interested. That's where he ended up liking the magic. There was a commercial that, well, around here anyway, I don't know if it was nationwide. I think it was for, what was it for? Insurance or something like that. And he has, George has this short that's called The Vanishing Lady, and they used that. So, yeah. And of course, then he went back home to Paris, studied painting. This guy was a Renaissance man. He learned all sorts of stuff. And, while he worked with the family, he continued his interest in stage magic. And that's where he was discovered by a famous magician at the time called Jean Eugene Robert Houdin. And I really hope I'm saying that right. He took magic lessons from Emile, and I'll put the names down in the description, because again, I know I'm butchering these. And his instructor, this Emile, gave him the opportunity to perform public shows. So he wasn't doing anything publicly. Apparently, this Jean found him, but wasn't really doing anything with them. It was like he was interested, but which is kind of interesting. So he had absolutely no interest in the shoe company. I mean, he sold it and moved on, which doesn't surprise me in the least. And kind of figured that's what he was going to do. Because, and then he purchased, because Jean Eugene had his own theater. And so Georges purchased the theater. And although the theater was superb and equipped with lights, levers, trapdoors, and all this other cool gadgets, and many of the available illusions and tricks were out of date. And people weren't really going to the theater, to that particular theater. So apparently, Jean Eugene was not at that point as popular. So he was popular at one time, so maybe that's why. It doesn't really say much about that, but how he found Georges, but wasn't really doing anything. So a lot of times in the entertainment world, it it's like the old thing where the veterans see the younger generation as a threat, and they'll act like they're going to raise them into the rank, raise them up, but they don't really. I've seen it so many times. I had somebody say that they were going to help me when I was in dance. I had someone tell me that they were going to help me. Never happened. I got worse. It's just a thing, cause and especially when you've been doing it for so long, you get the idea that you're being replaced. But a lot of times, the younger people see you as a mentor. Well, the older people don't see that. They're going to get replaced. Nobody wants to see them anymore. It's been like that as far back as then, even further. Shoot, in ancient times, people would just kill you. So, no lie. Because I would, researching some of the ancient stuff, we've figured out that sometimes people were murdered just for being an entertainer. It's like, oh no. So buying the theater was kind of a risk because of the fact that people weren't really coming to it. And and a lot of the stuff was out of date. It had all the bells and whistles, but some of those bells and whistles weren't really working. However, he was a thinker. I mean, here's a guy that his teachers didn't, when he was in school, his teachers didn't really like that he was drawing all over the textbooks. And when that didn't work, he was making puppets. He was making the puppeteer thing and everything, marionettes, and so he's got this going for him. And for the next 10 years or so, he personally created illusions that were comical. They were dramatic. They brought people in. And what was the count that they had? About 30. So these people were coming in to the theater to see these illusions. They were brand new. They were fresh. And let's see, one of the best known illusions was recalcitrant decapitating man. I'll write it down. My eyes are going bonkers trying to read that. In which a professor's head is cut off in the middle of a speech and continues talking until it is returned to his body. That had to be cool to see. When he purchased the theater, he also inherited its chief mechanic. and such performers as, I'm not going to try that name, but I will put it, of course, who had become his mistress. Oh dear, he had that going. And later his second wife. Yeah, I'm not really going to go into his personal life. Just his professional. While running the theater, yeah, because, you have to figure that they really didn't have, that happened then too. While running the theater, he also worked as a political cartoonist. And like I said, this guy did everything. Once he became, as the owner, he began working more behind the scenes than on stage. He acted as director, producer, writer, set, and costume designer, as well as inventing many of the magic tricks. He also brought in magicians of the time. So it wasn't just him. It wasn't like he was being the center of attention, which is smart on his part. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've read about these theaters because, with me restoring photos of these stage performers, and a lot of times you end up reading about the theaters that they worked in, and you read about the director, the owners and that sort of thing. And you're reading about these people and how they were so desperate for attention, and that's how it fell apart. It's like, oh gosh. Oh, performances also included fairy pantomimes and automaton. I don't know what that is. It sounds kind of like a Transformer performance during intermission, and I hope that isn't. I should know what that is. Magic lantern shows. Wow, he did everything in special effects during, such as a snowfall and lightning. In 1895, he was elected president of the Chamber Syndical of Illusionists. That's pretty neat. So, for having that place, having everything kind of run down, and he brought it to life. Again, he had this going for him. Instead of seeing it as run down, you're like, I can work with this. Okay, so his film career, after he was elected, the Chamber Syndic, again, it's in French. To be quite honest, I'll just go ahead and give you the link to this so you can read it. As much as I don't like using Wikipedia, that's basically what I use, because it has more information than some of the other places I go. But he worked with the Lumiere, which doesn't surprise me. He worked with the Lumiere brothers. Now, the Lumiere brothers are the ones that invented autochrome. And if you don't know what autochrome are the early color photos. So when you see the early color photos, I love how people get so upset over the fact that we're colorizing photos. It's like, it's already been done. It's been done as far back as Civil War. It's just now we do it digitally. But no, the Lumiere brothers are the ones that figured out how to colorize photographs. And of course, now Méliès is like, or Georges is like, and it says here, he offered the brothers a chunk of money, because it's in French coin, a chunk of money for one of their machines, and they refused, anxious to keep a close control of their invention, which is smart. You know, Louis Daguerre, he was listening in on a party and somebody was talking about the daguerreotype. And it wasn't called the daguerreotype. He was just talking about this idea for, and Louis Daguerre, next thing you know, he patented and everything. And now what we know as the daguerreotype, it would have probably been another person's invention if. So he pretty much stole someone else's invention. So then he became desperate to find one of these film projectors for the theater. He wanted, that's what he wanted. And but it turned out, I'm pretty sure that because a lot of his stuff is hand tinted. But he did show film. He had a kinetograph in the theater, which is a cast iron camera projector. And he referred to it as the coffee grinder. And machine gun because of the noise it made. I would not doubt it. We had, when I was in grade school, we had one of those projectors, and it was pretty old. And one of those ones that had the two reels on it. There's ones that have like one reel, and we had the two reel, and it clicked. It was like, and a lot of times we heard that more than we heard the movie. And because we would have fun Friday, and we got to watch a movie. And yeah, I was just in that that time when you would either watch the projector movie or you watch the VCR movie. But anyway, that's funny that he called it the coffee grinder or the machine and the machine gun. Oh, that's hilarious. So the count is 500 films between 1896 and 1913. And I'd believe it because when I was looking up to find out if he was the one that did that horror film, my goodness, I didn't realize just how many he did. And it's like just in 1896. Yeah. I will put the link for his Wikipedia page, which again, yeah. I don't always use Wikipedia when I give you the information here. Not always. And then I will also give you his Internet Movie Database page, and just 1896 alone, my goodness. He was a busy little bee. 1896 and 1897. Just those 2 years. Or no? No, 1896 looks like his busiest. But my goodness. Yeah, began shooting his first film in 1896, screening them at the theater. And he founded the Star Film Company. Is that still around? Oh. No, it doesn't say. I don't see you anyway. But anyway, like the company that Roscoe and Buster had, The only reason it fell apart was because of what happened with Roscoe. Buster was still keeping it together, and then next thing you know, Hollywood was threatening everybody. And most of his earlier shows, his earlier films were basically showing the magic tricks and that sort of thing. And then he kind of branched out because he was showing like the one camera effects and everything. And the one man band, he was doing like multiple exposures. And that showed in one man band, he plays 7 different characters at simultaneously. And that reminds me of what I had to do in college. We had to do like this thing where it shows in one photo each of us, us in the photo at the same time, but we were doing different things. It was a beast. None of us liked it. But it was a Photoshop thing, so. Many of his earliest films were copies and remakes of Lumiere Brothers films. So he was kind of bitter. If you don't give me this, I'll show you. His film Playing Cards to an early Lumiere film. However, many of his other early films reflected his knack for theatric and spectacle, such as A Terrible Night, in which a hotel guest is attacked by a giant peg bug. Oh, goodness. So basically, I'm not going to read all of this because it's pretty long. He gained tremendous success, because after that it just talks about his movies and everything. He gained extreme success over his films and creativity. And of course, we know about some of them, like that I've shown, like the first. I'm totally blanking, and it's totally pissing me off. Like Trip to the Moon and the horror film. There's been a few others. I actually saw Thanos Archive, which I totally recommend you see. They show a lot of the post-mortem pictures. I will put their Facebook page and their Instagram. They're a great page because they also showed his which one was it? Oh, I'm not gonna look right now. But they showed a clip from one of his films, and I think it was anyway, I'm not gonna bother with it, but in fact, that one that they were talking about where he is seen, the one-man band, it actually, from what I have read in other places, it did inspire one of Buster Keaton's films, which was that opera where Buster Keaton is seen in the opera house and he's playing all of the people in it. He's playing the player, the orchestra, and he's playing the people in the audience. He's playing the people on stage. So from what I've read, Buster Keaton was inspired by One Man Band. And I don't know why I forgot that, but sometimes. So anyway, yeah, this is George. I thought we would do something different. And I will, of course, put those links on there. I don't, like I said, I don't always read Wikipedia. I always look at someone, and sometimes Wikipedia doesn't have everything. Wikipedia is not the strongest place to look, trust me. Um, but anyway, he was major, and there are people even now who are extremely inspired by his work. So he continues to inspire people in theater, in Hollywood, just and even costume design and photography. Just like with my with that assignment that I had to do. That none of us really liked to do, but we had to do it anyway. So, like with the stuff with Photoshop, even with Photoshop, when you're adding people in, that's kind of a Georges Méliès thing, So, yeah, like I said, you think that you're doing something new, and you gotta ask yourself, wait, he's probably already done it because of the stop motion that he did, the illusion thing, the disappearing thing, the time lapse, the hand painting. He did it all. And I will try to find more of his the dissolving stuff, because I don't think I did that, but I did do some of the time lapse and some of the other stuff. But yeah, he was a genius at what he did, and he continues to inspire.